Welcome to This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. I'm Cat Justice, your host, and this week has been the 10th annual Women Veterans Recognition Week, a week of events that not only celebrates the accomplishments of women veterans, but brings some awareness to some unique needs and challenges that they're facing in the transition into civilian life. Why am I sitting next to this wonderful person? Because joining us today, Dee Quaranta, the founder, CEO, president of Northeast Florida Women's Veterans, also retired United States Air Force. It's been a while since we got to visit like this. True. And in context of our podcast here, we get to just visit. We get to go a little deeper on the topics here, and we focus on economic growth and development. And the reason I reached out to you, I thought, boy, what a great time, this timing to just talk about the possibilities for maybe some untapped potential in the workforce. Yes. Companies out there that need employees, and we watch what's happening with employment and every here. Why don't we start, Dee, just tell us a little about your experience. Obviously, I just mentioned you served in the Air Force, and then tell us about your organization.
Okay, so I spent 20 years in the Air Force, spent a lot of time overseas, enjoyed my tours. After 20 years, I was ready to go, had kids.
That was enough?
Yeah, well, I had kids and I wanted to be a mom, so I retired. But once I retired, I traveled 5 more years overseas with my spouse. But when I came back to Jacksonville, I found it a little challenging because I was not used to living in the civilian world. So the transition was a little difficult. But I was able to find work, as we talked about earlier, at the Chamber for a year, and then I went to work for CareerSource in workforce development. So I did that for 9 years, but during that time, there was just a lot of women veterans that were coming through the center that needed some unique help.
What are some of those unique challenges? As I understand it, I mean, there's different structure when you're in the military versus the civilian world. There's a different language almost, right?
It is. And so, you know, those unique needs were basically daycare. When I say unique needs, daycare don't seem unique, but when you're used to taking your kid to the base daycare and not having any challenges with that, it is hard. And you don't have that family network that you're used to having when you were in the military. But some of these women are in non-traditional career fields, and so they're required to work rotating shifts and things like that. So daycare is definitely a challenge for them. I was also encountering women who was dealing with domestic violence, was dealing with PTSD and MST, and so they were dealing with mental health issues. And at the time, the VA really didn't have the capacity to handle all the mental health cases that they were getting into the clinic.
So tell us more about what your organization does to help women veterans as they make that transition.
So when I began to see all of this increased need, at first I went out to try to find some resources in the community, and a lot of them just didn't exist. So I thought, okay, who's going to do this? And I decided to start the organization, just helping one veteran at a time. And so now we are providing financial assistance. We're providing, we actually have a shelter down on the beach, which has been there since 2021. We provide case management. I have a social worker on staff that provides counseling. There's a food pantry. We have professional and personal development workshops. There's so much going on over there on Century 21.
So I talked about it's the 10th annual Women Veterans Recognition Week.
Yes.
This is something your organization began. You started this 10 years ago. Right?
Yes. So 10 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of conversation about women veterans. And so I thought if I started celebrating women veterans, just take a week and start having events. It would bring more community awareness, not only that we were here in the community, but some of the challenges and accomplishments that are connected to women veterans.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you mentioned that transition for you, a year at the Chamber of Commerce, some with CareerSource. So obviously that CareerSource experience is something you would be able to bring into this world of trying to help connect women veterans as they transition into the civilian community.
Yes, it really helped me understand what employers were looking for, to help women frame their resume to make sure it's what the employer is looking for. One of the things I started when I was at Career Source is called Vet First Friday. And I used to bring in a couple of employers in a room full of veterans, and they're able to listen to the employer and find out what that culture is, what that employer is looking at. Because when you go to a job fair, there's just so many people. It's kind of difficult to get that one-on-one attention. But in Vet First Friday, you have a more intimate setting. And I thought that was important because we apply for jobs because we think the job description looks great, but we don't know if we are going to be a good fit when it comes to the culture and what the employer is really looking for.
Yeah. So what are some of those things that somebody listening or watching our podcast today, a woman veteran, what are some of the things that she would need to know about, okay, how do I get into the workforce? And your experience, what are those businesses looking for? What do they really need that somebody who's served in our military is able to provide?
Okay, one thing I do want to say, a lot of times our veterans come out of the military and we have a different expectation. We're going to get the greatest job, we're going to get the greatest pay, and we're not really willing to bend on that.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
every one of you deserve it. I'll say that. Every one of you deserve that recognition and reward for your service. But it's not an automatic
thing. It's not reality.
Thing. Okay.
It's not reality.
Yeah.
And it's a workshop that I teach called Her Perfect World, Her Real World, a real world.
Two different things?
Yes, because we have expectations, and what we want is what's perfect. But when we come out, it's not there. So what are we going to do about it? You know, and we can get depressed. And,
initially that sounds like it'd be disappointing, discouraging.
Yeah, but you have to accept reality and start. What is the requirement? And as a veteran coming out of the military, we really need to walk into a place like Career Source and talk to a vet rep to find out what those expectations are that the employers have. Because I was a leaver, so I got to go out and talk with employers and find out what it is they were looking for, so that when I did talk to a veteran, I knew, maybe this might be a good fit for them. But I came out with a 6-page resume when I got out of the military.
A little longer than most employers want to look at, is that right?
Right. So, but I didn't know. I went in when I was 18 years old, and so I didn't know anything
so
different.
20 years later, you're proud of all you've accomplished, and you want somebody to know everything you did in those 20 years, right?
Exactly. And the government required you to write a resume like that anyway, so I was simply following that instruction. But I always say, go on the company's website if you're interested in working for a company, because we hear, okay, they work for XYZ. I hear they make good money, blah, blah, blah. That is not the way to do it. You really have to go online and check that company out and find out if you're going to be a good fit there.
I heard they pay well. It's not enough due diligence to know if you're going to be a good fit there, right?
Yeah, money isn't everything. It buys a lot of things, but it's not everything, because if you're not happy in that job, you're going to have some problems. Yeah. And I realize you can't always work in your passion first. Sometimes you just have to go and pay the bills. But I always encourage people to work toward their passion, because when things get tough on the job, you're going to stay because this is what you love to do.
Military communities, I mean, the jobs that our military members do, and so what our veterans have done when they exit the service, I mean, they do translate to what happens in the civilian world, but maybe veterans aren't thinking about it in the same way that civilian employer is. Is that right?
That's true. Some of the jobs, and I guess I could use myself as an example, I wasn't in a non-traditional career field. I was admin, so I was at the desk most of the time working with documents, a lot of documents. But when I moved to Charleston and I went to work for this company, I was the executive director's secretary. I'm like, I'm a secretary. I spent 20 years in the Air Force to be a secretary, you know. But I did it. I stayed there until I found something better. That transition was tough for me because here I was in the military supervising, managing people and processes, and now I'm just. I don't want to belittle the job of the secretary because they keep things together. But for me at that time, you know, I no longer had the responsibilities of taking care of people and processes. I just did the typing and filing.
Yeah.
So it was different. So for any military member, a lot of times they come out having, you know, worked in the bomb silo. How are you going to translate that?
Yes, right.
In the civilian world.
Most companies in the civilian world don't have that role,
right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's in the infantry. You know, what am I going to do now? And it can be discouraging because you're trying to figure out where you fit in this civilian world.
Yeah. So one of the things I know your organization does, you say you're advocating for and promoting community awareness of the challenges and accomplishments. And you're doing that local, state, national level, right?
Yes. So I travel to Tallahassee at times, and sometimes I go to DC and meet up with the Center on Women Veterans. We'll be going up in September for a summit. And we'll be able to talk to our secretary, the VA, and his undersecretaries. We've done it before. I think we went in December. But we go and talk about Florida. We try to make sure Florida is represented because we are the second largest population of veterans in the country. And so I think we need to have a voice in Tallahassee as well as in DC.
It's one of the wonderful things about being in Northeast Florida, multiple military bases or National Guard headquarters here, all of that.
Yes.
And it's wonderful for our area when veterans retire and they say, I'm going to stay in Jacksonville, or hey, I served there once, I'm going back to Jacksonville in the area.
Yes, it's a great place to live. It's the military-friendly community, and I think we have a title to that effect as well. It is, Northeast Florida has the largest population of veterans in the state of Florida. So people are choosing, and it's growing. And with that growth, it means more jobs need to be available. Quality jobs need to be available for those veterans because they bring such great skills to the table. Yeah,
so to me, just hearing you talk about it, and we've visited over the years about this issue, but it seems like we're talking about transitions, but there needs to be a translation of the roles, the experience, the skills I developed in the military. Now, how does that fit into what a civilian employer wants?
Right, and there are agencies out there to include a career source that help veterans translate those skill sets. It's really important. We use a lot of acronyms and jargon that, you know.
In the military?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you know. So it's very important. And when you're writing, you don't think about that. You just figure everybody understands what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it's important to get in front of somebody who's skilled in knowing how to do those translations or show you how to do it, so that you have a great resume. And resumes, they change so much. You know, 10 years ago, we wrote resumes one way, but now it's totally different.
That's a good point.
So we have to be current on what the requirements are.
Yeah. I remember some of my master's work in communication. Consensual validation was the big deal. If you and I agreed on what something meant, then that's the meaning. So acronyms, you and I can agree JTB is that road that goes from 95 out to the beaches.
Exactly.
But all the other acronyms, if I'm a civilian and you're a military veteran, we may not agree on
What's
all
your
of those
AFSC? Even the Army wouldn't know what that means. It's an Air Force term. So, we have to be careful about those acronyms in our resume.
Well, one of the things that I thought was important to talk about is just the impact that veteran businesses have on our community and our economy. And this is something where women veterans, maybe there's access to use their skills in this way too. You've got to have some of that entrepreneurial spirit and some training there in order to do it. It's not easy. But veteran-owned small businesses really make a contribution here.
Yes, and I don't have the statistics on that, but I know that they're growing. The great thing about what we have in place for women veterans, we have a program called Her Biz, which help women veterans start their own business.
I love it.
And it's a 6-month program, so it's not a jump in, jump out. You've got to do the work. And when they graduate in 6 months, the expectation is that they're ready to launch. And then you have the Veteran Chamber of Commerce, which is, I think, a couple of years old, that's out there. So there's a lot of resources, and the Small Business Administration, of course, out there to help women to start their business. And small business is the thing now. I think about, especially women veterans, when we talk about mental health and isolation and different things, that not everybody is a good fit for the 9 to 5 in an office environment. They may work better by themselves, and small business is one way to do that. So we have to just tap into all the options that's available out there in Jacksonville. It's a great place to do it.
So before we wrap up, let's go back to this idea of it's the 10th annual. So what happens during this week of recognition for women veterans?
So, you know, we had a great opening ceremony at the proclamation on Monday with the mayor. Yesterday we had a VSO forum where we brought all the, there I am with the acronyms.
A Veteran Service Organization, yes.
The
VSO,
acronym.
that's right. I was thinking about it.
The Veteran Service Officers Forum, where they were able to come together and learn some things as far as health for women veterans when it comes to filing claims. So it was a very interesting event. We also had a paint and sip, and we were sipping on Kool-Aid.
Sure. It sounds relaxing, right?
It was a great time to come together, and you know, that type of event is set up to help women come out of isolation and re-engage with
some connection. Don't say networking, but that's really a chance to connect. And you build your network when you're connecting with other people.
That's true. And tonight we will have an event called Women, Wealth, and Wine, talking about how to invest, making decisions for retirement, those types of things.
Yeah, important information.
Yes, it is. And of course, the last event is the gala, which is always my favorite because we are celebrating women who have went before us. We call them our trailblazers.
The trailblazers.
Yes.
And do I understand this correctly? This time it's honoring World War II and Vietnam era women veterans?
And Korean War era. Yes. Now,
Wow.
our World War II, I will tell you, when we started 10 years ago, we had 10 of them. They have all passed. But 2 years ago, we met Miss Anita, who is 102 or 103. And last year, she was at the gala.
Wow.
And she
Got some goosebumps right there,
I know,
Dee.
she's a rock star. And her daughter called a few days ago and said she would not make the gala this year. She's very disappointed about that. But we want them to know that we appreciate them, because it doesn't matter what you did in the military back then, you still built a foundation for those of us who came afterwards. And so I always want to celebrate them. And then we'll also celebrate women veterans who are volunteering in their community, because we have a lot of women who are not working the 9 to 5, but they're giving a lot of volunteer hours to this community. And I always want to celebrate them as well.
Well, I saw on your webpage talking about the gala. The theme for the gala is igniting the trailblazer in you. What does that mean?
Yes, everybody is a trailblazer. I was talking to someone today, and they were saying, you know, I wonder what legacy I will leave behind. And I said, you know,
it's a powerful question.
Yeah, and we have to think about our life, the impact that we make on the lives of others, and what changes, positive changes that we make in our community that is not gonna, may not affect me, but it may affect my granddaughter or my grandson down the road. And so that makes you a trailblazer. Do something that's gonna be lasting and that's going to impact your community.
You're doing that now, and you've done that for at least a decade, right?
I don't know.
Do you feel it?
You know, my theme is just do the work. So I keep my head down and just do the work. That's it.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you very much. And again, having known you, and we don't visit often enough,
Yeah.
but to get to be back in studio and talking about this in depth like this, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So thank you to our guest, Dee Quaranta, today. New episodes drop every Thursday at 9 in the morning, but we thank you for joining us for This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition.